عليكم ورحمة الله. We are back now with the second part. We talked about modernism. We looked at why it succeeded, in which aspects it succeeded, and then we looked at the aspects that it failed in, and we saw how it deteriorated and led to creating art with no actually value, with no real value. Now we will come to the new beginnings. The new beginnings from 1955 to 1980. Poetry has become a minority taste. So actually during those years, poetry became less popular. What was popular at that time are the novels. The novels became very popular at that time and everybody wanted to read them. But poetry, it had just a small number of people caring about. The only true poets who have approached popularity between John Benjamin and Seamus Heaney have been Larkin, Hughes, Sylvia Plath, who is the wife of Hughes, and Tony Harrison. So those that was a very limited number of, as you can see, of poets who became popular around in England at that time. There have been many good poets, and a fine anthology could be made of English verse from 1955 to 2000. But the position of poetry within literature has been weakened, like literature itself, by media competition and social change in an age of celebrity. So at that time, from 1955, we know that they discovered TV, and after that they discovered the internet, because we are talking up to 2000. Okay, so the social media started to appear, the TV and other things. So actually more focus was on them rather than on poetry. Also, the subject matters or the topics that appeared in poetry were very important for the people to care about this poetry or not. So subject matter can generate interest. The Holocaust, for example, at that time, Northern Ireland, the death of one person, minority politics, those were the subject matters that attracted people to read poetry. While other poetry has had to be sold hard to reach a readership of any size. Few general publications carry any verse. Poetry magazines are little magazines, okay? So only the major topics at that time. Other topics were not of any importance for people, and they could hardly be sold. Fine. Now let's come to Seamus Heaney. Seamus Heaney is our poet today, the one who we read for. Of course, he is not more optimistic than actually T.S. Eliot. And you would find, no, it's just not being pessimistic, but he's trying to be realistic in his actually poem. Okay, so let's start with Seamus Heaney. He was born in 1939, died in 2013. So he is one of the current poets actually, and that's why we will listen and watch the poem by his own voice. Okay, he won the Nobel Prize in 1997, so that's not a long time ago. Okay, Heaney considers himself no longer British, but Irish, so he is Irish. He was born into a rural Catholic family in Protestant Northern Ireland. Poems written out of the experience, his poems were written out of the experience of his own people, can reflect this, as in the Ministry of Fear. Now, Heaney had taken an Irish passport and lived in the Republic. His voice is Irish. يعني المقصود فيه التعبير بتاعه أو تعبيراته أو أفكاره اللي عبر عنها were Irish, as are most of his subjects. But he writes in English, and like many in Ireland, he partook in the everyday culture of the English-speaking British Isles. So even though he spoke English, he wrote in English, he lived the everyday life of the English people, still his affiliation and his loyalty was to Ireland. He was a popular professor of poetry at Oxford and has for 2 decades been the most widely read poet in Britain. Today, inshallah, we will discuss a poem for Heaney, which is Blackberry Picking. You know blackberry? The blackberry? التوت الأسود هذا. Okay? This classic Heaney poem, published in his first published volume, the 1966 book, which is titled Death of a Naturalist, is simultaneously about picking blackberries in August and on another level, يعني فيها 2 levels blackberry picking. It's about picking blackberries, but it is also about a loss of youthful innocence and a growing awareness of disappointment as we grow up. يبقى هو صح الصورة اللي بده يرسمها إلنا كيف طلقية التوت الأسود، أوكي، ولكن الوصف إلها هي فعليا كمان بتعطينا صورة عن ضياع براءة الطفولة، وإنه إحنا نوصل لمرحلة الفهم، نكبر ونفهم الحياة ونشعر بالألم لأنه ضيعنا الطفولة وضيعنا جمالها as we grow up. Okay, so now we will watch a video reading Blackberry Picking, and after that we will come to discuss it. Okay, fine, just stay with me. Okay, so let's now watch and listen to Seamus Heaney.
Blackberry picking. Late August, given heavy rain and sun for a full week, the blackberries would ripen. At first, just one, a glossy purple clot, among others red, green, hard as a knot. You ate that first one, and its flesh was sweet like thickened wine. Summer's blood was in it, leaving stains upon the tongue and lust for picking. Then red ones inked up, and that hunger sent us out with milk cans, pea tins, jam pots, where briars scratched and wet grass bleached our boots. Round hay fields, cornfields, and potato drills, we trekked and picked until the cans were full, until the tinkling bottom had been covered with green ones, and on top, big dark blobs burned like a plate of eyes. Our hands were peppered with thorn pricks, our palms sticky as bluebeards. We hoarded the fresh berries in the byre, but when the bath was filled, we found a fur, a rat-grey fungus, glutting on our cash. The juice was stinking too. Once off the bush, the fruit fermented. The sweet flesh would turn sour. I always felt like crying. It wasn't fair that all the lovely canfuls smelt of rot. Each year, I hoped they'd keep. Knew they would not.
So sad, but that's life. Okay, fine. Where is the... Okay, so now let's come to our to discussing this poem. Okay, so this is the poem. This is the text of the poem. Okay, and this is the second stanza. Fine. So let's come to the summary. Blackberry Picking is a poem that contrasts childhood with adulthood. يبقى هي المقصود فيها إنها تعمل لنا مقارنة ما بين الطفولة وما بين البلوغ. and explores the disappointments and the tensions that ensue. In two short stanzas, the reader is taken into the exciting, taking us into the exciting. Okay, fine. He is taken, it means that he is happy about something, okay? So the reader is taken into the exciting, idealistic world of the young blackberry picker and the harsh reality of time as perceived by the hardened adult. So you have two times here in this poem. The time of the childhood and the time of the adulthood. The time of the childhood is represented by picking the first sweet fruit of the blackberry, okay? While the second time is represented by those blackberry fruit becoming fermented and go sour and bad, okay? This poem is much more than a straight description of harvesting blackberries. طبعا هو مش قصده انه يوصف لنا حصاد التوت الأسود، okay? So it raises the questions of hope in and the innocence of good things in childhood, okay? And answers them with the harsh realities of time and adulthood. يبقى كل الأمل اللي بكون عنا وإحنا أطفال، كل البراءة، كل الأشياء الرائعة في الطفولة، okay? إجابتها إلنا، okay? أحلامنا في الطفولة إجابتها إلنا بتيجي وين؟ في حقائق الصعبة اللي بنقابلها في وقت البلوغ. When we are adults, we understand that life is not simple as we thought. Life is not beautiful as we used to think. Life is not actually giving. Life is not about having a dream and achieving that dream. No, life is a harsh reality that could deprive you from reaching all the great things that you thought about one day. So never trust your feelings in childhood, because when you grow up, that's the reality. Okay, now let's come to stanza 1. I hope Hanan will not hate me now for this idea, but that's life, Hanan. Okay, so let's come to stanza number 1. Blackberry Picking is a poem that relies heavily on the contrast between the first and the second stanza for its main theme, as if the first stanza represents your childhood, the second stanza represents your adulthood, okay? So its theme, that of childhood ideals being undermined by the harsh reality of time and adulthood. So the ideals of love, of giving, of being happy, of playing, enjoying, all these actual ideals will be destroyed and disappear in your adulthood. The act of picking blackberries becomes a metaphor for this changing world, from the endless sweetness and hope of the young person into the decay and grim reality of the more mature. إذا البلاكبيريز إحنا أول ما بنلقطهم بيكونوا حلوين وقويين هيك وسويت، أوكي؟ وبنعبيهم في الكان لأنهم كانوا يلقطوا ويعبوهم في كان، أوكي؟ في العلبة. لما نتركهم شوية حنلاقيهم إيه؟ إنهم اتخمروا وأصبح طعمهم مز، وبعد شوية حنلاحظ إنه ريحتهم أصبحوا غير صالحين للأكل. Okay? For this cycle of the blackberries life is similar to the cycle of a human being's life. We start our life as children. We enjoy that life. We love the life. We are innocent. We want to play. And we think that everything is beautiful. But as we grow up, we lose this touch of innocence. And we start to understand the harsh reality of our life. The speaker is initially immersed in this enthusiastic world of late summer, a time of ripening berries full of juice like thickened wine. The whole scene is sparked by a single berry ate by the speaker's friend. إذا وإحنا بنقرأ وبنسمع المقطع الأول من القصيدة بنشعر بالحماسة وبالفرح وبالحب يعني المنظر الرائع لحبة التوت اللي أخذها صاحب الشاعر وقطعها وبدأ يأكل فيها. So it is all reflection of your innocent childhood. While the second stanza, the transition to the second stanza is a gentle one. The memory continuing in the past tense, the alliteration and strong guttural words combining to produce that rich textured sound synonymous with Heaney. Okay? The change comes here, this is the important point. The change comes in line 18 when the child in the gang of berry pickers becomes aware of the rat gray fungus on the blackberries. الآن انتبه إنه في فطريات بدت عليها. A sure sign of rot and decay. تعرفوا هذه الشبكة التعفن. أيوة. Rat gray fungus اللي هو العفن. On the blackberries, a sure sign of rot and decay. Hallmarks of passing time. طبعا متى بيظهر العفن؟ طبيعي بعد ما يمر الوقت. فكان وجود العفن دليل hallmarks of passing time. دليل على انه الوقت مضى وانتهى. Okay. Oops. So the juice turned sour and life with it. Okay. The speaker expresses sadness when this inevitable rot sets in. The irreversible effects of maturation are hard to take. ما دام الإنسان بدأ يكبر وينضج طبيعي عملية الكبر هذه فيش إمكانية إنه إحنا نرجعها. It's irreversible. غير قابلة للإعادة. Okay? All the hard work ended up a waste, and the fact that the speaker thought it not fair implies that some great injustice had been perpetrated. The juice turned sour and life with it. إذن كل تعبنا في الحياة وكل جهادنا في الحياة بيبدأ يتدمر مع شو؟ مع كبرنا، لأنه بنكبر في العمر. زي اللي بيعيش العمر يجمع فلوس عشان يستمتع فيها، ولما بيجي وقت إنه خلص جمع فلوس بيلاقي إنه صحته انتهت وعمره انتهى وحتى الأوقات الجميلة انتهت. فأصبح there is no need, or that money is useless. Okay? So the same thing, our poet here and his friend, they were running in the field and collecting the blackberries and filling their cans and put those cans aside, and they were so happy with eating the first fruit of the blackberries. But then when they looked while the time is passing, they discovered that those blackberries matured more and ripened and rotted. Okay? Fine. The speaker expresses sadness when this inevitable rot sets in. The irreversible effects of maturation are hard to take. All the hard work ended up a waste, and the fact that the speaker thought it not fair implies that some great injustice had been perpetrated. Okay? Fine. So we read this. Now there is a definite tension created in these last few lines. The idealistic hope of the child being stretched to the limit by the processes in nature and the passage of time. That hope persisted despite everything, but the self-deceit couldn't last. Reality turned out to be the winner. So the child had hope, but while the time is passing, that hope was lost and the reality turned out to be the winner. Definitely, it is the harsh reality. You collected the blackberries, you put them, and you are happy to look at them, okay? But they will not last forever. They will ripen and they will rot, Okay, so you can't stop that. So even if you are happy because you collected them and you have hope that you will eat a lot of them, later you will discover that you are mistaken. And this is the life. Once ripe berries decay, childhood memories are fleeting, and it becomes impossible to keep things fresh all the time. طبعا احنا بنقدرش بنجيب الفاكهة وفرحانين عليها، لكن انه احنا نبقيها انها تضل طازة مستحيل. Doesn't it remind you of not blackberries, of strawberries? We buy them red and fresh from the market, and once we reach the house, they ripen and they are actually start to rotten or to rot. Okay. Once ripe berries decay, childhood, yes, we read this. So the actual picking becomes a metaphor for childhood energy and the innocent, sweet, fruitful life. إذن عملية تلقيط البلاك بيريز رمزية ترمز إلى اللي هي طاقة الطفولة والبراءة تبعتها والحياة الحلوة اللي في ذلك الوقت. The mature reflection in the second stanza is poignant. The summer blood eventually cools. Okay, so the mature reflection in the second stanza is poignant. Okay, the summer blood eventually cools. Ripe berries go off. The natural cycles cannot be denied. Of course, you cannot deny that this is the natural cycle. This is the natural cycle. Okay, so actually this word, okay, you can replace it with the word sad, okay, or touching. Okay, poignant is sad or touching. Okay, so the summer blood eventually cools, ripe berries go off, and the natural cycles cannot be denied. Okay, now growing up. So what is that? Yeah. Growing up is about reconciling ourselves with our hopes and expectations to the realities of the world. So you start to give up the childhood hopes and expectations and submit to the realities of the world. نبدأ نستسلم للواقع ونتخلى عن أحلام الطفولة. And blackberry picking addresses this theme. It is a rite of passage that we all go through. Though it's sometimes difficult to pinpoint the exact moment when disillusionment begins to cloud our clear and sunny skies of hope. يعني صحيح إحنا بنكبر وبنبدأ نتخلى عن أحلام الطفولة وبنتخلى عن براءتها وبنتخلى عن مرحها وعفويتها، إلا إنه إحنا حتى أحيانا ما بنقدرش نعرف وين النقطة بالضبط اللي بدت حياتنا أو الغيوم تغطي فترة الطفولة تبعتنا في أي وقت في أي زمن من عمرنا. ولكن مؤكد كل ما كبرنا في العمر كل ما فقدنا هذه العفوية والبراءة وحب الحياة. So what is the tone of a blackberry picking? Okay, definitely the tone in blackberry begins jovial, okay, happy and light, okay, happy and light, but ends sad and dark. This emphasizes the narrator's contentment with innocent naivety البساطة at the beginning of the poem and his regrets and dissatisfaction in life at the end. Okay, now let's come to some literary devices. Okay, we will end up with those literary devices, so just 2 slides. Okay, so the poem is sensuous and appeals to the 5 senses. He uses various poetic devices to depict a memorable picture in our minds. He writes about the sight of the blackberries. If you go back to the poem and read it, he gives full description and he is actually appealing to our eyes, to our sense of taste, okay? So the fall of them, how they tasted, the sound of the blackberries when they hit the bottom of the cans, and finally the smell of rot when the blackberries go rotten. So all the description is appealing to our senses. Okay, now symbolism. Symbolism is a use of symbols to signify ideas and qualities by giving them symbolic meanings different from their literal meanings. So he talked about blackberries or blueberries, but are they is our poet caring about picking them really? No, actually. The blueberries or the blackberries are a symbol of youth, joy, and happiness. Okay, while you would find that picking them and them becoming rotten is a symbol of adulthood. So here the blackberries and picking them, if you remember, go back to the slides, we said that picking the blackberries is a symbol of childhood and its innocence. So it's a symbol of youth, joy, and happiness in childhood, while their ripening and becoming rotten is a symbol of adulthood and submitting to harsh reality. So what is the deeper meaning of blackberry picking? Okay, so however, just like many other famous poems, this poem conveys deeper meaning through symbolism and imagery. The poem is an extended metaphor. This is the important point. Please underline it. The poem is an extended metaphor for life. It expresses the feelings of youth, vigor, and hope, the intensity of lust and greed, and the disappointment of losing what one strived for in life. Yes, of course, you will be disappointed when you grow up, because when you remember what you wanted or what you strived for to get in this life and you discover that you are unable to get, you will be disappointed. Okay, that's the end of our poem. Thanks for watching, and I hope that it will be easy for you to understand. Thank you.